Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chris Macpherson Show. We progress through our teens and get into some big sport, all of the black and white opinion, no grey here. We're looking forward to digging into plenty in today's episode. Make sure to keep up to date with us in between episodes you get across our social media channels. You can find us on X, Instagram, and Facebook, and of course YouTube, the Chris Macpherson Show, or you can use our handle, the Chris Mac Show. If you are watching us on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and to hit the bell down the bottom so that you get notified of all our latest episodes and short content coming to you. As I said, a big show this week. We're digging into the Australian Open, which is right in its peak. We're also going to talk about the A-League. We're going to dig into the Big Bash, the Women's Ashes, and plenty more. But to get us underway, there's no place we're better poised to start this week than with the tennis. And we welcome back the first serves, Christian Montegan. Christian, how are the sleep patterns going?
Hello, Chris. Yeah, they're not good. Let's be honest. I was mentioning to you before, got home about 2 a.m. after the Alcaraz Djokovic, and yeah, it's just depending on the press conferences when they finish, when the game's finished. So yeah, it's been a bit all over the shop, but wouldn't have it any other way, to be honest.
We only get it once a year for 2 weeks, and it's a microcosm of a whole dump of almost a year's worth of tennis face to face for you guys. So we love the dedication, mate. We love you rolling back out today to talk about this before we dig into the remainder of the quarterfinals. But let's start there. There was certainly some shocks yesterday, and some would say that Novak Djokovic, at the ripe age of 37, getting it done, getting through to his 50th Grand Slam semi-final, was the biggest surprise. But I'm going to transition after that to another one that I think was a bigger surprise. But what did you take away from Novak and Carlos?
It was weird because at the start, Djokovic had that what was an apparent groin injury. A few games into the first set, he was grimacing. They showed the highlights once he went for that medical timeout. It was about a 5-10 minute break, and you thought, okay, looking at these highlights, you think, is he going to even survive the whole match? Then afterwards with Jim Courier, he actually admitted that if he dropped that second set, he was debating whether to continue, if he was going to pull the pin. I'm not too sure if that's true or not, just saying that, but I mean, the first thing he definitely did look like he was struggling physically, and then he took some pain medication pills, and then all of a sudden, just it was a completely new Novak. And Alcaraz, I think, partly it was due to his unforced errors. Some of his decision making just wasn't on it. It just wasn't clicking for some reason. And to Djokovic's credit, just hung in there. Some incredible rallies. There was one, I think, in the third or fourth set where, arguably, point of the tournament. Just I don't know how many shots it was, but it was had to be at least a 30-shot rally, which is unbelievable. Just the athleticism on both of them, just insane. And then, yeah, obviously Djokovic somehow getting over the line. That's just the experience coming through. And you look at Alcaraz and think, yeah, he's a 4-time Grand Slam champion, but he has these dips, doesn't he, during some of these big matches. And if he wants to stay consistent up the top with the likes of, Yannick Sinner, I know he is still very young. He's only 21. But he still hasn't made a semis of an Australian Open. So he was still bidding to become the first player to be the youngest player to win all 4 majors. So, I mean, obviously that's got to wait now. But for Djokovic, he moves on and he'll face Alexander Zverev.
Yeah, huge a clash that we've seen these two come head-to-head before. Zverev reasonably comfortably through comparative to probably Djokovic's match. But again, still, it's two of the more seasoned campaigners still going around with these two now. We've got quite that young brigade going through, and I think you shared a stat on your social media maybe overnight around that 50 Grand Slam semi-finals. The next best in terms of active players is 9.
Correct. Yeah, Zverev 9, and there's a couple of others, Medvedev and someone else, I believe. Zverev's a funny one. I mean, every time he's played Novak, he's always made it close. He has. I think it's a very, very good matchup for him. And I wouldn't honestly be surprised if he goes through to the final. I don't know, might have egg on my face. Djokovic might breeze in straight sets, but I truly do believe Zverev's game does match up. The big serve can move Novak around, can really dictate the points well. I think this is a great opportunity. Obviously, made the semi-finals of the AO last year, and Zverev was the one who knocked out Alcaraz as well. He's always sort of in these Grand Slam finals. He's made 2, I believe, 2 sets up against Team, US Open, had that lead against Alcaraz, the French Open final last year. It's like, is this finally a time? Because the window is narrowing down, and he's got to take one of these chances. And against Novak, presumably not 100% fit, Who knows? This could be his chance to shine.
Certainly could be. Speaking of surprises, on the other side of the coin, in the women's yesterday, someone who both you and I highly rated. We talked about her only a couple of weeks ago when we had you on the show and how she'd come in such good form out of the United Cup. Coco Gauff, a surprise exit in the day session yesterday as we record this against Paula Badosa.
This is a surprise, but not a surprise at the same time. Like, if you know Paula Badosa's game and her story, she is just a phenomenal talent, right? It's just the injuries that she's suffered over the past couple of years. She's had this back fracture for the past 12 months, had to, take cortisone injections. She's admitted, almost every day to try, be pain-free, essentially, when that hasn't even worked at times. So to be in this position now, to knock off Coco in straight sets, I thought, yeah, her game yesterday was just unbelievable. Just her power hitting, the way she was just moving Coco around the court, the versatility. Yeah, for Coco, obviously disappointing. Number 3 seed, her form, like we both mentioned a couple of weeks ago, heading in, you thought, okay, she's probably the favourite to go all the way, considering that. But I thought as well, on her racket, she did make a lot of mistakes. Pressure got to her in the big moments. And yeah, Paula Badosa fully deserved the victory.
Certainly does. She'll come up against Arina Sabalenka, the two-time defending champion in the semi-finals. So she's taken down the favourite and now takes down probably arguably the woman who would have been equal billing with Coco at the top. This top half of the draw is loaded. If Paula Badosa makes it through to this Grand Slam final, she's well and truly earned it.
Oh, for sure, 100%. Got to remember, she won Indian Wells 2-3 years ago. So this is a quality player we're talking about. I think as high as world number 3 or 2 in the world. If she can beat Coco in straights, I think her body can hold up to go all the way. We'll have to wait and see, obviously, in this next semi-final coming up. But she has the game. She has the weapons. It's just, can she stay fit and keep it together consistently? I think she can.
And then on the other side of the draw with the women's, we head to what, and a lot of this will be known by the time we get through this, but the other side has Keys and Svitolina in the quarterfinal, and then the other one, Emma Navarro, who is really making her way through the ranks. And, she's played some really strong tennis, knocking off Jabeur and Kazatkina in the last 2, which is no mean feat. Up against Iga Swiatek, though, who is just doing Iga Swiatek thing. She's dropped 2 games in her last 2 matches against Emma Raducanu and Lise as well.
Yeah, Iga's a funny one because Australian Open, she hasn't really performed as well as we'd hoped, wouldn't she? Her best appearances, semi-finals in 2022, knocked down in the 3rd round last year to Linda Noskova. That was a massive shock. And Emma Navarro, she's caused quite a couple of upsets last year, didn't she? Navarro, a bit inconsistent towards the back end of last year, so I wasn't really expecting too much from her. But again, new tournament, fresh start. She has been looking really well. Really impressive. So, Svitolina and Keys will be another great match looking forward to. Does Svitolina have the legs to continue this impressive run? It's just unbelievable, isn't it? But Madison Keys, she's made the US Open final about 8 years ago. This could be another, again, opportunity where the window is narrowing and she doesn't have too many chances to go. So it's going to be, a really enticing clash.
Yeah, those are going to be interesting to see. Certainly, as you said, the Svitolina and her husband, Gael Monfils, stories that have occurred. Obviously, we saw Monfils retired a couple of days ago, just due to sheer fatigue, I think, in the end. He looked like he was going to drop in the match before that and somehow got the win. So, wonderful stories, though. I think that was against Fritz when he got the win. But they just look like they're loving their tennis and loving having each other around at their matches. And, yeah, it's really refreshing to see. Alina, obviously, not the oldest like Gael is, but again, she's not a spring chicken when you look at her against some of those names like Iga and Coco and some of these ones that are coming through.
You can see how they're benefiting off each other, being around each other. You see, for example, Dimonor and Katie Bolter, right? I think for Katie, she's really upped her game and, taken, tips and all these observations from such a top 10 player like Alex. Monfils has obviously been on the tour for 20 plus years now. And to have, someone nurturing Svitolina. I know Alina was already up the top before they met, but to have that sort of, duo with all that experience together surely must help.
It certainly can't hurt. And the proof's in the pudding. Gael won Auckland, obviously, a few weeks ago, and I think the 3rd oldest player in the Open era to win an ATP Tour title on the main tour. So not too bad. Although it makes me feel old when I realise I'm only less than 12 months younger than him. In terms of, you touched about Alex de Minaur, he's obviously in action essentially as the show goes live. He's in the quarterfinals as well. How do you see his side of the draw shaping up? We know it's not a great matchup on form against Yannick Sinner, 9-0. Is this, Yannick Sinner's half of the draw to lose, or do you see de Minaur or one of the others in the other quarterfinal shaping up as a threat to him?
For me, it's Sinner's to lose. I can't see any other way around it, to be honest. Unless Sinner's not 100%, we saw he did suffer with a bit of illness against Holger Rune in his fourth round match. So, but again, Sinner still made it look easy, won it in four and just found a way. So if that's Sinner not at his best, then if he is at his best, and I really feel for de Minaur because, Alex has mentioned in the past 12 months, he's tried to tweak his game to beat the likes of Yannick, but you're going to have to tweak your game significantly to really test him. The first serve percentage has to improve. I think it was in the 40s, 49% against Alex Macpherson. That's not going to cut it against Sinner. You're going to have to really stay in the battle the first few games. Stay in the rallies. Don't give him 3 points, and just go from there and hope for the best. So I think de Minaur is one of those players that will go in a match with a positive mindset no matter what. He's not going to look at the 0-9 head-to-head and think, okay, I've got no chance. That's just not Alex and his personality. So he's going to use the crowd to get behind him, but ultimately I'm predicting Sinner in 3 or 4 sets. I can't see anything else.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't shape well. As you said, his first serve needs to get sorted. He was lucky to get away with that against Alex Macpherson. The other one, and these two are flying under the radar a bit, but Ben Shelton looking to make a second Grand Slam semi-final. He made the quarterfinals back in 2023 here. He's done that again this year. He made the semis, I think, of the US the same year. Up against Lorenzo Sonego. He was part of the Italian team that won the Davis Cup a couple of years ago. This is his first deep run in a Grand Slam. I don't think he'd made it past the fourth round previously anywhere. Do we see him? How do you see this one shaping up? It's a bit of a sort of slightly different styles and two names that might not be as well known to the casual tennis public.
Yeah, I think the public won't be familiar with Lorenzo Sonego. That's for sure, because as you mentioned, hasn't reached past the fourth round of a major, whereas you've got Ben Shelton, obviously really made that breakthrough a couple of years ago, and he made the quarters here, and then I believe it was a semi-final appearance as well at the US Open, and he's been a really consistent figure on the ATP Tour in the big tournaments. So I think with his big serve, just the power in general, it's just about whether he can string those together throughout the whole match, because there are sort of dips, like I said, with Alcaraz, where you just don't quite know what to expect. But with the quality of Shelton does have his disposal, I think it should be close to a straight set victory for him. It's just whether does he have the maturity yet to do that. And you see him drop sets when he shouldn't. But Sonego, this is new territory for him. He might go in there, all guns blazing, nothing to lose. He's the one who actually knocked out João Fonseca, who we were really big on. Knocked him out in the second round. So yeah, it's going to be really fascinating. Different contrasting styles. I think Shelton does win, but hey, who knows?
Going to be interesting to see. Certainly, whoever wins, if they come up against Yannick Sinner or Alex de Minaur, are going to have their work cut out in the semi-finals. Hopefully, it is the Demon somehow breaking that drought. He's got to break it at some point, is my theory. In terms of it, mate, we'll move on to some juniors and some other talk points in a moment. But let's put our money where our mouth is. Who takes the double? Who's your women's winner? Who's your men's winner? Is it just the straight up arena into Yannick? I think you might get maybe $3.50 for that double if you're putting money on it, if you're lucky. So. I'll go first, and I'll go a little bit, not too left field, but I'm going to go Zverev to take out the men's.
Okay.
As you said, if not now, when? It is the window. We know that he likes the hard courts. We know he likes the heat. And I'm going to go Iga. She's just been in such good form. I think, as I said, she's dropped 4 games. She dropped a few in her first round, but since then, across her other rounds, she's dropped 4 games in 3 matches. So she's in the best form we've probably seen her in Australia. She's going to have a work cut out to get past some of those names, like the winner of Sabalenka and Badosa. But I think she sits in the better half of the draw, and we'll see how that shapes up. She'll probably lose now that I've said that before the show goes to air.
I'm trying not to be boring, but I've got to say what you said at the start: Sinner and Sabalenka for me. Especially Alcaraz's loss against Djokovic. I think that's really opened the door now for Sinner, because we saw Sinner Djokovic last year at the AO, and in terms of the physicality on court, where Sinner just absolutely moved Novak around. Just Djokovic didn't have any answers, did he? And Sinner's had the better of him in the past few games as well, so he has that added confidence behind him. And then Sabalenka, it just comes down to I just don't trust Iga in Australia yet. I still need to see a bit more from her. Sabalenka, back-to-back champion, aiming for 3 in a row. I'm going to go for those two for the titles.
Keeping it very simple and straightforward is Christian Montegan. In terms of other Aussie hopes, the juniors is probably our main spot. I know we've still got a pair alive, I think, in the semi-finals of the mixed doubles that went through to the semis last night, potentially. I think actually we've got two pairs, if I'm not mistaken, both wild cards. We've got Burrell and Smith.
Yeah.
In the opposite sides of the draw. So the ideal scenario, obviously, there would be they both make it through to the final and we're guaranteed an Aussie champion. But the junior women's is where I want to shift. Unfortunately, in the junior men's singles, it's all over. We saw Crucial went out the #1 seed in the second round. But Emerson Jones, we talked about her. She had that big win in the first round in Adelaide. She's the #1 seed in the women's singles, and I think she's seeded as well in the women's doubles alongside one of the Brits. Is she a legitimate chance here, not only to win the singles, but potentially the doubles as well? Is that what we're looking at?
Doubles, definitely. I think the singles, this is probably her last window, isn't it, in the juniors, because she's 16 years old. Her brother Hayden just missed out on junior qualification as well, didn't make the cutoff. So, Jones, she made 2 Grand Slam junior finals last year, Australian Open she lost, and also Wimbledon. So at the back of her mind, she'll want to win one of these because there's not going to be too many chances left for her. But this Australian summer, she's just been in unbelievable form. That maiden WTA Tour win in Adelaide, where she knocked off, I believe, the number 37 in the world at the time. She's been playing some incredible tennis, hasn't she? And going in with that #1 seed, I think if she doesn't win, I'll be quite surprised. She dropped the first set yesterday against an unseeded American. I was quite taken back by that. I thought, okay, wow, should be pretty comfortable, which it wasn't. But in the end, she found a way, and that's the maturity on her for a 16-year-old. It just shows how far she's grown already.
It's certainly interesting. I was looking at the seeding and stuff, and it's much more challenging with the juniors, right? Because not all of them play on the same international tour all the time. But all of the top, she's the only top 3 seed left. There's only 2 of the top 4 left. We've got 2 qualifiers through, sitting in the third round as well. So there's quite a few that have dropped by the wayside. So 2 of the top 3 are still standing. But it's an interesting piece. And the other talking point is, and we were talking about it before, Talia Kokinas, who got a wild card. I watched her in her first round where she took down the 10th seed, Dancheva, as well. So she's looking quite good, and she's through to the third round as well. So we've got a couple of the Aussie girls still alive and kicking in the junior singles, but they're both in the same half of the draw, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the only shattering part about it. They both made the final, obviously, again, like the mixed doubles, guaranteed winner, and you're laughing. You're going home happy and clapping. So, to be honest, I don't think Kokinas can, outlast it until the final. It's been a great run, but I just think there's other better seeded players in there that I've heard of that, they've just got a bit too much firepower. But she's only 16. She's definitely got, obviously, a lot of, room for growth and development, which is always a positive when you take into account these junior events. It can really propel your career kind of to the next level. From that perspective, I think her career definitely is bright indeed.
Yeah, she's going to be a name to watch over the coming years too. Candice, looking at the amount of power she's already got as a young player. As we said, Jones into the quarterfinals for the doubles. She's got a clash to go into the quarterfinals for the singles. It's going to be a lot of tennis for her to play. That's going to be the other thing. If she's going to do the double of the singles and the doubles, it's a lot of tennis to get through. But again, she's got a good partner in Klugman from Great Britain. They're the #2 seeds there. So we'll watch this and keep an eye on that as the senior draws develop as well. Still plenty of action to come at AO over the next few days, mate. A big thank you to you, as always, for coming on. A little sleep deprived. I'm sure you'll take that if there's some more thrillers, some more sleep deprivation over the next few days. But again, we look forward to catching up with you in the coming weeks as we wrap up the Australian Open and then look ahead to the Davis Cup and some other things to come.
Sounds good, mate. Thanks for having me.
Moving from our Melbourne tennis aficionado on to Mr. Consistent. He's back on deck a second week in a row after his little spell in Canberra. Lachie Avil, good to have you back on deck.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, I appreciate getting the tag back after just notching consecutive weeks back to back. Thought it might take a little bit longer, but yeah, happy to be here.
I'm pretty liberal with names around here. Don't worry about that. But something else we're liberal with. We're going to spread our lens across a bit more of the sporting landscape this week. And a sport we haven't really covered yet with the Chris McPherson show, we'll dig into in winter. It's a passion of mine. The rugby league, the Gillaroos of the Australian rugby league side. Now, I know rugby league, not necessarily the core of your wheelhouse, Lachie, but these guys are heading over for a massive rugby league test over in Las Vegas in early March, which by my maths is about 6 weeks away. Their pre-tournament camp has been cancelled with players given just days' notice. This seems like a really bizarre move. They've obviously originally planned to have a 6-week runway and get the girls together, build into it. They're out of season. Would we see this in many, if any, other sports? Or is it just a women's sport problem and not a rugby league problem?
It depends on what the reasoning for cancelling the camp was, right? And you're right. I don't have a lot of ins in rugby league specifically, but from what I've read on this topic, there seems to be obviously very late notice for the players that the camp isn't going ahead, but also zero explanation to the general public on why that decision was made. So has something happened behind the scenes that needs resolving before they get the team together? Is it an issue of resources, which in case probably would lead to the argument that it's a women's sports issue, unfortunate as that might be? We really have no idea what the reasoning is behind it. But as you say, it's very unfortunate because getting the Gillaroos to go with these 4 NRL sides to Vegas to put on a showcase for the sport is a great opportunity for, women's sport, women's rugby league specifically as well. It's a massive platform to them to be able to show what they can do. So anything that puts their ability to do that at jeopardy is definitely disappointing.
Yeah, bizarre. It seems from what's been reported that Friday night the players were told they were scheduled to arrive on the Gold Coast Saturday morning for this preparation for the test against England. As you said, it's added to the slate of what was 2 NRL games for the debut in Las Vegas last year. They've also added an English Super League game, so it was a full slate of 4 games. The game's still scheduled to go ahead, but just a little less prep time. Hopefully it doesn't impact them too much. But another one for the bizarre sports files, which we certainly like to file into and transitions probably very well into our next piece, which I'm going to call, and I might lure in our expert producer, JR, on this piece. I might call this peak A-League, but not in the A-League. This is something, Lachie, I'd expect to see in the A-League, and we'll cut back to you in a moment for some reaction. But, JR, can you explain what's going on here?
So during the game at the Gabba last Thursday night, there was a small fire that broke out. Just let's have a look at some images right now. So this is what was going on over there at the DJ decks. So it appears from my audio visual perspective, it looks like it was actually a pyro system that had gone wrong, but it was some sort of electrical fire is all that's been reported on. Alex Dyson did put in the great comment that like the DJ was just dropping too much fire. So like maybe that's where we've sort of ended up with. But yeah, this sort of stopped the game. There was smoke everywhere at the Gabba, and it was like shocking scenes to watch. Because you got to ask the question, like they were at this for like 5-10 minutes trying to get it out. Like this went on for a while. So we'll bring Lachie back in at this stage.
That guy with the fire extinguisher that we saw in the bottom corner picture looked very casual until it sparked back up, and all of a sudden then he was just sort of sitting there just one-handed, just sort of like, this is normal business, but that's something I expect to see in the A-League, not the Big Bash, Lachie.
Yeah, it is one of those moments, isn't it? I do hate to break the illusion. I saw a brief portion of this on socials at one point. I don't know if you're aware, Dr. Chris Brown bowled like the ceremonial first ball, and I saw him stitch together a cut of this as well, and his excuse was that the radar gun was following him and he just got too much heat on the first delivery and it bonked out the machine. So who knows how it started, but yeah, one of those crazy moments.
I have to say, watching that Chris Brown delivery, I did see it in another package, and he looks like one of the most legitimate celebrity cricketers we might have brought to scene. And his former show questions the definition of celebrity, but we'll let him. We might get a call up onto one of these shows one day yet. So bizarre. As we said, very close to peak A-League, but it's peak Big Bash for now. Speaking of the Big Bash finals, JR, we're counting down.
Yeah, so the Big Bash finals, they are approaching. As we record, we're getting sort of ready for the first match. But I do have some questions in regards to how did your predictions go? Because let's just have a quick look at them on screen. I won't be able to pop myself on screen for this part, but I see a team that you weren't expecting to have there, and I know that our man in Melbourne, Lachie, may have a little bit to say on this matter.
Yeah, it certainly surprised a lot that the Stars got there. And look, I'm going to take it. It came down to that last game between the Stars and the Scorchers. Had the Scorchers won that, I would have been 4 out of 4. Your Heat, miserable defence of the title, JR, they disappeared. But Lachie, the Stars, they were 0-5 when we had Menners on the show the other week. They've made it to 5-5. They're in form heading into the finals, but is it going to be enough?
Well, I don't know if it's going to be enough to get them all the way. They obviously have this amazing historical record of getting to finals and losing them as well. And I do have a funny story about this. At 0-5, obviously the Stars, they have enough firepower to win every game, right? So as optimistic as my dad usually is, he's a Stars fan, I'm a Renegades fan, so we like to go against each other. It's one of the rare sports where we are against each other in that respect. But for a little bit of fun, when the Stars were 0-5, put $1 on the Stars to go and get to the grand final and lose it. So not to win the whole thing, but to get the final and lose it. And they've gone on this remarkable run. I think when they were 4-5, he got his first cash out option at $2.60, but he decided to hold firm and stick with it. And they've made it into the finals now. So yeah, an exceptional recovery. I mean, we all know that T20 is one of those sports, or even the format of cricket, where things are variable and anything can happen, which is what makes it so exciting. But imagine if this was the one where the Stars did manage to go all the way. It would be a serious Cinderella story. I think it would be 8 games in a row at that point. So look out, record books.
We might have to check with your old man, mate, as to what he's going to do if they get to the final. Is he going to hedge his bets, and or is he just going to take the emotional hedge? But it's going to be interesting to see for sure. And one thing is, 2 of the 4 teams in the finals have never won the Big Bash before. So the Hurricanes, obviously in the pole position, they'll play the Sixers for the right to host the final. And as I said, the Sixers obviously are perennial titles and grand finalists. The Thunder have won it before, but neither the Stars nor the Hurricanes have won it before. So we'll watch how that plays out over the coming week, and we'll be able to recap the Big Bash as a whole when we get back together next week. Speaking of things that we can recap already, the Women's Ashes, they've been retained. Lachie, I know you've got a little bit of a foot in both camps here. I think you're probably, when it comes to this, probably more Australian than you are English in these pieces. But we've got 8 points out of 16, so we can't lose it. We can still draw it if England were to win the remaining 2 white ball fixtures and the test. But we just need to win 1 more of those games, or even draw the test, and we're home and hosed for a win in the series as well as retaining the title. So great to see the Ashes, the Women's Ashes, or the Washes as they're being termed, retained and held in Australian soil.
How dare you, Chris, insinuate that my loyalties lie anywhere else apart from Australia in this series? Look, it is true. When we talk about football, Australia and England are very far removed, so it's easy to play both sides. But when it comes to the cricket, and especially the Ashes, it is Australia all the way, and absolutely dominated as well. A few rotations in this final T20 to get over the line as well. Who was that? Made the century. And then had to jump out of this T20 game.
We'll be on the hop there from the one dayers. Is that what you're talking?
Yeah.
And Ash Gardner.
Ash Gardner, that's it. The name slipped me by, but she had to miss this game, and they still won on and won it, and obviously retained the Ashes. They won't be satisfied by that. Of course, they're going to want to win the Ashes. And even if the jig is up by the time we get to the test match, just the fact that it is a test match at the MCG will be, alluring in its own right. So, yeah, the girls have done a remarkable job. They've been one of the, world's top cricketing teams for a long time now in the women's side of things. So just reward for effort, and hopefully they kick on from here.
Yeah, certainly good to see them bounce back after that World Cup where they exited early only last year. So got 2 more of the T20s up against the Poms Thursday and Saturday, and then we head into the one-off test, which starts on the 30th of January. Speaking of test match cricket, that ties us in to the Australian tour of Sri Lanka. Channel 7, that being, have secured the broadcast rights. There was a question about whether these were going to be seen on Australian soil, Lachie. They have secured them. They'll be live and free on 7 and 7+. JR, you're back with us. I know you like to sit by and have the test cricket on in the background when you're playing and getting through your other commitments. Mate, it's great to see that we're going to be able to watch these games in what should be a friendly time slot, I believe.
It's looking like an extremely friendly time slot. So, like, it's sort of late afternoon, early evening Australia time for these tests, and there's obviously a lot of cricket happening right now. It's very unusual for us to be like talking about a overseas series when we're in the like last week of January. Like I'd usually be expecting some sort of one-day try series right now. So to still get cricket to watch at like reasonable times at that sort of time of night, this is great for us.
It certainly is. Subcontinental cricket's normally a good time slot. The clash, though, Lachie, unfortunately, the days do line up a little bit and overlap with the women's test, which the irony is it's going to be day-night cricket at the MCG.
Yep.
So, look, it means more cricket to choose from is never enough. I said that to someone the other day when we were talking about, some rugby league things starting to happen. More sport's never enough. It means we've got choice. It means that we probably need more TVs on the walls, but that's okay. How do you think this impacts the viewing of the women's test?
Look, it'll definitely detract from it. That's just how things goes. But the fact that they've got the Channel 7 deal obviously is free to air. So interest in the Australian men's test team has never been higher. Like even casual fans of cricket saw Sam Constance tee off at the MCG on Boxing Day, and now there's a very keen set of eyes on that team. And then you've got the dedicated women's supporters who have been with this team all the way will likely already be on the likes of KO or Foxtel, right? So there is a little bit of segregation there, which probably helps. You got fans of one and the other. Obviously, it sucks that even if we didn't have like a 10 a.m. start, so then we could finish the women's and roll into the men's in the afternoon. But these international calendars are so packed these days, it's kind of hard to make it work. So there's another question here of Australia touring to a country like Sri Lanka. That's very important, as we know that we get around to all these kind of second tier testing nations. I know they're all considered in the first tier, but you understand what I mean, not the big three. So something's got to give. Unfortunately, the overlap of the fixture is what had to give. But yeah, more cricket is good cricket, I think.
Only so many hours in a day, but it's good news for the likes of JB Hi-Fi and Harvey Norman, because I'm sure there'll be a few people out there buying a second lounge room TV very shortly. We might take a bit of a break, Lock, recharge, refuel, and get back to some round ball action with your Round Ball Australia cap on.
That's good.
Well, it's time to welcome back Mr. Consistent, Lachie Avil from Round Ball Australia, officially wearing the RBA hat, not to be confused with the Reserve Bank of Australia. You don't control rates, just the interest in Australian football, mate. There's lots happening in the football land.
Yeah, there is. Absolutely. We've entered into, halfway point of January, which means the A-League transfer window is open. A lot of teams looking to make some moves as we get towards an end of especially A-League men's season that is extremely competitive up the top end. So lots of teams going into January with optimism and thinking that if they make the right moves, they can be towards the pointy end at the end of the season. So yeah, it's all very exciting at the moment.
Certainly is very exciting. Something else is very exciting, maybe not for you, but as a Manchester City fan, we're going to go over to your ancestral home of England and the English Premier League, and the Saudis look like they've dug a couple more oil wells because they are paying Erling Haaland an absolute mint. $1 million a week is the rough number that they're talking about, which I don't even know how you spend that for the next 10 years.
Yeah, look, it's the epitome of the stupidity of how crazy these numbers have gotten in terms of the finances of football. You got clubs like Man City with the ownership they have, and they can spend that kind of money on players. I'd love to know what their kind of revenue numbers will look like for the next 10 years to manage to fit all these players in, the sustainability rules, but I'm sure they'll find a way. Of course, the other subtext there is that they're about to receive the verdict of their previous allegations, but I'm sure they'll find a way around them, right? So just the fact that a footballer can be paid this much money over such a long period of time as well. It's also interesting that Haaland has agreed to such a long contract. I guess he's kind of looking around the world and he's going, well, if I ever don't want to be at Man City, where else would I really go? No one's, apart from maybe PSG, is going to be able to pay him anywhere close to the amount of money he's getting here. So he's certainly setting himself up. Just even you could go to sleep for a couple of weeks on holiday and you'd be set up for life, and he's got 10 years of it. So an absolutely stupid value on his contract, but I guess that's kind of the world we live in now.
Yeah, well, I think Pep Guardiola said that he was even surprised that Erling signed something as long as it was, which is interesting as to who's pulling the strings on these things if Pep wasn't knowing that it was happening. But
never the coach these days.
Great news. No, exactly right. The coaches don't have much to say. They just move the markers on the whiteboard, right?
Yeah.
But again, he has shown, whether it's value for money, he's certainly shown a propensity for a return on some investment in terms of the number of goals he scored. We've seen even this year in a underperforming Manchester City side, 17 goals on the board in EPL matches in 22 games. So he certainly knows his way to the back of the net, and they'll be expecting that return continues. And you hope for his sake that the pressure doesn't get to him over the coming years, as undoubtedly he reaches his crest of his footballing career and then maybe down the other side in that 10-year period.
Yeah, I do love Roy Keane's analysis of Erling Haaland as a player. He says, finisher, best player in the world, right? He puts away the goals. Field play, average League Two player, right? General play, bouncing off the passes and whatever. And look, Roy Keane's probably right. You look at him link up, he doesn't really touch the ball much in build up play. He's that kind of striker where you play him within the width of the box and you put balls into him and he scores goals. And he scores goals better than anyone else in the world at the moment. So if you were going to spend $1 million, pounds, sterling, whatever it is, a week on someone, Erling Haaland is probably your man.
Well, when you look at it, there's a comparison. James Harden never really played much defense in the NBA, and he's on similar sort of money. If you're good enough at one, you don't need to worry about the other end. And soccer probably even more so, or football probably even more so than basketball. But speaking of football, let's turn the attention back to Australia. And there's certainly lots happening. And again, I'm going to take this down a selfish point of view first, Lachie. The Newcastle Jets have headed to the overseas transfer market. Kota Mizunuma, a 34-year-old Japanese international, has now joined the Newcastle Jets for the remainder of this season. It's been a tough run for the Jets. This has got to be a little glimmer of hope, but I don't think he's going to turn around all of their fortunes on his own.
No, I mean, no player can do that. I will say I have paid a decent amount of attention to Yokohama F. Marinos over the last 5 years or so with all the Australian coaches that have been going through. And he isn't a name that has particularly stood out to me, to be brutally honest. So take of that what you will. But, an international signing. We've seen a lot come from Japan in the last even 12 to 18 months, which is really encouraging. I think a lot of A-League sides are waking up to Japan as a really good region to recruit players from. Obviously, it's just right on our doorstep. Competing in Asia is something that isn't foreign to them. So, cool for the Jets. They've obviously scouted him and got the deal over the line, which is great. But they'll need a few more people to come in if they really want to turn their season fortunes around.
Oh, we understand they're still active in the transfer market, as are a lot of sides. And we've seen with the window opening last Thursday, in line with our last episode, there's been a lot of mutual terminations, a lot of players moving, some interesting loan deals, some interesting signings. What are your key takeaways so far, noting that this window is still very much an active, in-process piece? Obviously one of the biggest names was Mitch Langerack coming to Melbourne Victory. That was going to happen already. That was announced pre-season. That was going to happen in this window. And we talked on it off air that, interestingly, he was on the bench on the weekend behind Jack Duncan, which I don't think anyone ever thought they would see.
Well, the extra part of that story is that despite this deal being lined up for so long, there was actually a little bit of paperwork that had to be completed after the window opened to get Langerack into the squad. And as of at least Thursday afternoon, that paperwork hadn't been completed. So at that point in time, they're playing Adelaide on Friday night. You got to put someone in goal. So for probably at least 24 hours before the game, they only had Jack Duncan as their option, like a legitimate option. But he's also had the performances this season to hold his spot, I think. So obviously, Mitch Langerack is one of the best goalkeepers in Asia. He has undoubted quality, and maybe it's a training thing as well. Who knows how long it'll take for him to embed himself in the squad. But I think it is Jack Duncan's spot to lose until he has a game where maybe, it's just that Langerack should come in because of Duncan's downfall. In terms of some other moves around the league, I think one of the most...
Mate, I'm going to take from that a headline that we can run with, that Jack Duncan is actually one of the top goalkeepers in Asia because he's in front of Mitch Langerack.
He's in front of the Langerack. Yeah, he is. Well, on form, you can't really argue with it. Like even conceding 3 goals in the original rivalry, you could still consider he had a pretty good game. So he's been really good from the Victory. In other moves, I think Pat Wood's loan from Sydney FC to Perth Glory is a really interesting one. They've brought in Josh Sotirio as well as another forward option. So they've essentially sent one out and brought one in, and you can look at that on the face of it and say, Pat Wood's your young, exciting player. Why are we not giving him opportunity? Well, that is what they're doing by actually loaning him out to Perth. And Sydney FC are one of the teams that have actually used loan moves the most efficiently out of any A-League club. You look at Adrian Segacic went overseas for a year and has come back, and now he's done extraordinarily well coming off the bench a lot of the time this year. They've just loaned out, I believe it's Mitch Glasson over to Finland as well. And then Pat Wood is going to get some minutes over in Perth, and they're bringing in Sotirio only on a 6-month contract, purely to be a little bit of cover. Maybe get some minutes in the ACL too, because he has experience playing in Asia as well. So you're bringing in the cover just in case you need it through injuries, but then you're also allowing one of your young future prospects to actually get A-League minutes. So I think it's very smart from Sydney FC. I think they're the best user of loans in the A-League, outgoing loans, that is. So That's definitely one of the interesting moves. But as I said, there's plenty of clubs, as you say, still being active because so many think they still have a chance of being successful this year.
I think unsurprisingly with where they're sitting on the ladder and their probably expectations at the moment, Perth have been one of the most active. Lachie Wales coming in is another one. And then the other talking point that I just wanted to get your thoughts on, Western United, one of the later pieces of breaking news is that Tom Heward-Bell will head to the J League. That's
J2.
To the J2 League, correct, yeah. With Montegan Yamagata. I probably pronounced that incorrectly, but that's, yeah. And then there's a familiar link up, though, back to the A-Leagues for him there.
Yeah, there is. And look, he's a keeper that came out of the blocks well, not this year, but the year before, and had some strong performances. It's hard to argue that Matt Sutton doesn't deserve his place ahead of him. He's had an extraordinary year, definitely up there in probably the top 3 keepers in the league this season. So Heward-Bell, he needed to move to get first team opportunity. Reportedly, according to Joey Lynch, Western are also receiving a fee for this move. I'm sure it's probably just in the low hundreds of thousands, not too much to talk about, maybe not even that much, to be perfectly honest. But they're getting something for him, and he gets to move to a club where he's going to get game time and opportunity. So probably a win for all parties. I'm sure Western United, we've talked a lot about their academy this year. I'm sure they've got another young kid waiting to step up and get some first-team experience. So I don't really see any negatives in that deal.
Certainly looks in recent years when we've seen young keepers in the last 12 months step into roles, or 18 months if you go back with the likes of Paulson, that they've, pardon the metaphor, but grabbed it with both hands. So, we hope the production line continues. We've been well-renowned since the days of Mark Bosnich for producing great keepers, and we hope that continues to be the case and lots more heading out onto the international market. But let's turn our attention to the A-Leagues, and there's plenty of A-Leagues on-field action happening. One of the biggest talking points from last week, you touched on just before the original rivalry. It was a key game, and it's catapulted Adelaide to the top of the A-League's ladder.
Yeah, massive. I mean, you can see there at one point on Monday night, MacArthur were leading their game against Wellington. You had the top 5 teams all within 3 points, right? So it really is anyone's up for grabs at the moment. Adelaide United in top spot. And yeah, you're right. The original rivalry was just such a massive, massive game. And it lived up to the occasion. The Vucks sold out their away bay. Hindmarsh was packed. At least 14,000. I believe there were some reports that maybe even some ticketing machines weren't working, so maybe a little bit more than the 14.1 that was recorded. So it's exceptional to see Hindmarsh packed out the way it was. It's always an intense fixture. And honestly, the moment for me that I love most was the winning goal in here. Ethan Alagich, son of a former Adelaide United player, in Richie Alagich, and just having that cross-generational link through the club. You could see how much it meant to him to score that winning goal. Just the passion that a lot of these South Australians coming through. When they finished the game, in terms of the players that were actually on the field, I think you got 3 of the defenders and then the goalkeeper. So I think there were like 7 South Australians who were actually on the field, right? So not even just Australians plus your visa players, South Australians coming through. They've done such a good job connecting themselves to the local community. They're a one-town club, of course, or a one-club town, Adelaide. That's probably the way to say it. But they've done exceptionally well. And just the passion on Ethan Alagich's face when he scored that goal shows what they're doing is working. And very, very exciting, I think, for the future of the Adelaide United Football Club.
Tell you what they did that did work was aggravating that Melbourne victory away bay with none other than Valtteri Bottas before the game. And JR sitting behind the buttons would have loved seeing this, and it might have almost converted him to being an Adelaide United fan, even though we know he's Newcastle like myself. But that was a nice little ploy, him just wandering around, sort of, I was going to say incognito, but it's not quite the right word. He was doing a lap of the pitch and then unfurled a jersey with Bottas and his number 77 on it in the famous Adelaide United scarlet red.
Yeah, he loves to wind people up, doesn't he? He's an honorary Australian. I think his partner's Australian as well, so he spends a lot of time down here. And yeah, he loves the lifestyle. He loves to wind people up, and there's not many better places to do that than in a away bay in a football match, that's for sure.
Did it from a safe distance, which obviously showed his wisdom. In other news from the round, Auckland back into the winner's circle, a 3-0 win at home. They're clearly a different side at home, but Saturday was one for surprising results as well, with Brisbane Roar finally breaking that drought that dates back to April in terms of their winning run.
Yeah, just shy of 300 days, which is ridiculous for a professional football club to not win a game. And I'm going to make the argument that this happened at absolutely the most hilarious time possible, right? Because we've heard some speculation that about a month ago, there were some serious considerations about Ruben Zadkovic and his position at the football club. And then, they have, he survived that. And then they had the run of Perth Glory at home, the Newcastle Jets at home, Central Coast Mariners at home, and they lost all three of those games. And it felt like it was just building to this tipping point where his position was going to be untenable. And Casper Tafter, the CEO of Brisbane Roar, before the Sydney game came out and did this interview with Channel 10 and said, we support Ruben at the moment. Anything can happen. We currently support our technical staff, right? All these kind of words, just leaving the door wide open for his removal. And then a few days later, they go and beat Sydney, who was, the tip for most people to win the league at the start of the season. So there's a massive asterisk in the fact that they only had 2 days off from playing in Wellington midweek. So to travel back to Sydney and then play that game against Brisbane would have been tough for them. And they, Brisbane almost gave it away as well, those 2 late goals. And it's just that in itself, I think, is a peak A-League moment. Of course, I'm speculating here, but I really do believe that, a heavy loss to Sydney here would have been the end to Zadkovic. And I think most fans, honestly, for Brisbane would have preferred that outcome because they could then move on and start fresh. But instead, they get a win, which is great in the moment, but does it mean that they're stuck with him for a little while longer? Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? I don't really know, but just the whole circumstance is hilarious.
Yes, the time will tell. There's certainly some twists in the tail, and as we can see, there's some clusters in the A-League ladder that will continue to peter out and manage their way as we shape the top 6 heading into the coming weeks. What's there occurring in round 14? But as we head to the week ahead and round 15, we've just got through the Macarthur and Wellington game. Wellington coming from behind to snatch a crucial 3 points, as you alluded to just before. Lachie, which sees Macarthur back in that mid-pack. There's plenty of games here to dissect, I guess, in terms of the key ones. What's got the most impact? We can see a double header for both Auckland and Wellington in the 7-day window.
Yeah, well, there's a number of games between clubs really close to each other on the table, which are going to have big ramifications. So midweek, Adelaide versus Auckland is massive. That is 1v2. You got the Big Blue between Victoria and Sydney on Friday night. I think that's 6v7 at the moment. And then obviously the Jets v Perth as well. So I think Adelaide-Auckland is the massive one. You've got Adelaide playing at home, which up until this Victoria game, they've conceded a lot of late goals. And Auckland have been very resolute defensively, and they like to play, that kind of a style of football where you're really solid for 60 minutes. And then if you can catch teams in moments late in the game, that's what you try to do. So I think Auckland go into that game with a really clear game plan and something that is likely to work. But Adelaide at home, I know it is midweek, but it is, a frightening away day at the moment. They are top of the league after all. So that's fascinating as well.
I think there'll be a strong crowd there. That's going to be interesting. And as you say, it rolls in then to Friday with the Big Blue, which Melbourne Victory, if you look at and count form as the amount of points you've got from your last 5 games, Melbourne Victory are the least informed side after Brisbane beat Sydney. But as we saw on the weekend, Sydney don't deal well with teams that aren't in form. So this could be...
Yeah, you're right. I mean, at least they'll have a little bit of a break since their last game, which, as we said, they didn't have when they went up against Brisbane. The Melbourne Victory, their performances haven't been as bad as their results suggested. They've just been, mainly, I think, defensive lapses in some key moments. I think you could point to 3 of them that they could have prevented in the Adelaide game, right? So for them, the might of the Sydney attack, it's going to be about being really resolute defensively. It's something they've seriously struggled with since Patrick Kisnorbo has departed the club, even for the whole season in moments. Maybe some individual errors here and there, but definitely since Arthur Dillers has stepped in. But Sydney have their own issues at the back. Their struggle is always in transition. So for me, Victory, I don't know about his fitness. It's been a bit of a hush topic, but Nishan Volupale strikes me as the player that could have a very big impact in this game. Someone who can break forward with strength and with pace as well. So you got the likes of Daniel Arzani, who is tricky and can throw a ball in, but in terms of that pacing behind Nishan's your guy. So hopefully he can be back for Victory. But 2 teams that, yes, Sydney have kind of come off this undefeated run, but a loss against Brisbane is really going to hurt the mentality, right? So it's going to be interesting. 2 teams probably not at their best, definitely not with their best starting 11s either, with Douglas Costa still out. So yeah, fascinating encounter.
Will be a fascinating encounter. Saturday throws up 3 encounters that are key for all 6 teams. When you have a look at where they sit, Melbourne City will want to come back to the winner's circle, as will Macarthur, to keep themselves in their races for the top of the ladder and the top 6 respectively. Wellington and Central Coast need to stay in touch. Newcastle and Perth trying to get away from Brisbane, who have now closed that gap. And then you head into a Wanderers team who are going to be desperate, and Auckland who will want to try and close up to Adelaide if they manage to get the 3 points and maybe extend that lead at the top. So every game has some really important bearing, and that's exactly what the A-Leagues would be hoping for. It's enthralling. There's not a game there that I don't see some good reasons for sitting down and watching, Lachie. So that's a good, I guess, barometer of the footballing landscape.
Absolutely. And, I think it also vindicates what we were talking about a couple of months ago when we saw all these derbies and big fixtures loaded into the front end of the season. Well, now we're hitting the halfway point. We've got a lot of those out of the way. But now we actually have these really interesting encounters that are built based off what their seasons have been so far, and similar ladder positions and just jostling for those finals positions, those premiership positions as well. And obviously to avoid the spoon, you don't want to end up in the bottom either, despite the fact it might be a little bit more interesting if we had relegation as well. But it's all these, not rivalries, but intense games and contests that have been grown out of the fact of where they sit on the table. So yeah, really exciting. I agree with you. There's not a single game here that won't be worth watching. So I'm looking forward to it.
Certainly not in those bottom positions as well. We'll have obviously Australia Cup ramifications when that comes around next year as well, which only minor, but it's another consideration as we look at those bottom rankings. Let's quickly flash to the Women's A-League, and there's been a lot happening there from a Newcastle point of view. I was certainly crowing in the Round Ball Australia chat the other day because they were off to a flying start. And again, I had to eat humble pie as they collapsed, and Wellington's, I guess, better performance saw them win 3-2. Probably the biggest talking point, Canberra versus Sydney midweek. We saw those horrific storms that hit the East Coast, especially Newcastle through Sydney. That game had to be stopped at the 54th minute. The APL have made the decision that the match result will stand at 54 minutes as a 2-0 lead to Sydney and count 3 points, which, again, for a Sydney side who struggling to get off the bottom of the ladder, that's going to be really crucial for them because that's going to add some points to their tally and move them up into, I guess, hunting for finals when we have a look at where they sit and how things are. And on that ladder that we've got there, that is pre that decision being made. So they are now up to 10 competition points.
Yeah, it's quite a tricky situation. Obviously, the APL have their policies and that's been stuck to. If, you play over half the game and there's not a legitimate way, or maybe if it's too out of the way to reschedule the match entirely, then a result counts if you get to the second half, which sucks because football should be played over 90 minutes. And, if there's within 3 points at the end of the season and, we're pointing to, maybe if the game continued, this would happen and this would happen. It's unfortunate, but, so is having to postpone a game due to lightning and weather, right? So it's really unfortunate that they had to make this decision. But also then you think, well, if we're getting into the end of the season, you have to reschedule a game. Where does it fit? You have to play another game in midweek. Do you not have that kind of good Sunday to Sunday window where it makes sense for teams to be able to do that? How does the travel work? So sometimes these things are just not manageable. I wish they were. I wish it was just as easy where we had a spare weekend that we could just plop a game into, but it doesn't always work that way.
I'm going to challenge a lot of that, and you probably knew that this was coming from some of our conversations in the Round Ball chat on WhatsApp, but I think it puts a price on it. I think most other leagues, and again, I understand that our league sits on a larger geographical footprint than most leagues, but most other leagues would find a way to get this done. I think my biggest question mark on this, and I think I use this line, is what price does it put on the integrity of what 3 points is worth? But also from a point of view of the fact that there was no clarity from the APL on the night, and again, I've talked about some other situations that have occurred earlier in this season and other seasons. It didn't seem that there was any clarity around the APL's actual guidelines before this, and it feels like they've made a decision and gone and implemented something after it. Because when we left the venue, or when the teams left the venue, my understanding is they weren't clear, and there'd been a situation in another game recently where the game potentially was going to be called off at halftime, where the APL commissioner wasn't clear on the day as to what the actual guidelines were that would take place and how that would be determined. So I've got some queries around how that process has played out. I'm glad they've set a precedent now, and that will be what's carried forward, but I don't know that was 100% clear at what I'll call full time or at the departure from the venue on Wednesday night.
Yeah, look, I think there does have to be a distinction made, and I can't make this personally, but does the match official or the APL representative or whatever have a clear understanding of the rules, or is there more considerations to the rule that have to be made after the game, right? So it's the case in community sport all the time where if something like this happens, if it's unsafe to continue, then you then have to, talk about it with the relevant organization or body, and then a decision is made. maybe if we're a professional sport, we can be a bit better than that and decide in that moment. But is it really on the official at the time to then look through the fixture, for the remaining 10 to 12 weeks and decide, okay, this is a good spot to have it? You probably can't do that on the day, right?
About the rescheduling. I think it's about having an actual rule and a clear understanding. If 45 minutes is the marker that makes a game, that they were clear on that rule. Whether they were clear on what would happen if they had to reschedule or all that stuff, that's certainly a subsequent piece. But again, I think being clear, and they only have a small panel of match commissioners. They don't grab people out of the crowd to do this. Someone from the APL, and there's communications at that time, in the time during the storm, all those sorts of things. Someone should have been able to make clarity there. We shouldn't have been waiting till 24 hours later, is my point around it should be clear. And we now know that. They've now said that. So hopefully that becomes the precedent. I certainly hope it applies to both the men's and women's games, because otherwise that's going to a whole other storm in a teacup, pun intended.
At least, we didn't get 10 rounds into the season and discover that goal difference wasn't the second tiebreaker on the ladder. We had a little more leeway than that.
Oh, it is maybe, in line with their form for the APL, but certainly that was an interesting one that, we've had the abandonment. It moved on. Everyone got home safely. That was the main piece. And as we said, the competition's now heating up. We're past the midpoint for all the teams. Everyone's played at least 11 games. There's some midweek games that are still to be played. And we've got a round ahead of us, which is, really exciting. And there's some really interesting games. I know the Newcastle are playing as part of a double header on Saturday night, a late game, which is going to be interesting. Melbourne against Sydney. Again, Sydney started to find some form maybe from that game. That's going to be a key one as well. I don't know what else you see here, Lachie, in terms of, what shapes up as really important for the ladder as we go forward.
Look, I think Brisbane is the one that personally stands out for me, because they had this really, really good start to the year and they started to lose that form a little bit. And to go away to Perth is not an easy place to try and recapture that, right? So that's going to be a real test of their mettle. Obviously, the quality of the disparity of the quality of the two teams is there from what we've seen so far this season. But, we just talked about it in the men's game, having to deal with that travel with a time frame as well. You see Perth Glory listed twice on there. Does that hinder or hurt them, So I think a big test for Brisbane and hopefully an opportunity for them to recapture some form.
I think you're 100% right there on Sunday night. That'll wrap us out in terms of that. Adelaide against Western United. Adelaide, the form team of the competition, alongside Melbourne City. Adelaide have won 4 of their last 5 and a draw in there as well. Western United found some really good form on Friday night, so that'll be an interesting one, although they do have the 2 games in a short window, and that'll be their 3rd game in 8 days. So that'll be interesting to see. But again, get down, support your men's and women's A-Leagues. If you want more football content, you can find Lachie and the crew on Round Ball Australia. I'm sure the dub this week will dig in further to that Sydney and Canberra drama. But a big thank you, as always, Lachie. We've gone everywhere from Manchester to Melbourne and everywhere in between this week. Thank you, as always, Mr. Consistent, and we look forward to having you back on the show soon.
Cheers, Chris. Always a pleasure.
Another bumper episode in the books. Thank you to our guests this week. Of course, Christian Montegan from The First Serve. You can catch up on all of his tennis articles and updates on The First Serve's website or The First Serve on Instagram and Facebook. Lachie Avil coming in and pinch hitting in a few spots, coming across all of the sport through to his focus on soccer. Again, you can find him on Round Ball Australia for their podcast channel or roundballaustralia.com.au, their website, as well as their social media channels, Round Ball Oz. They are keeping you up to date with everything across the soccer landscape. And a big thank you again to our man on the 1s and 2s. He made another cameo. It was good to have him back on screen this week. J.R. Carter, always getting the magic that gets our show out to you. Speaking of the show, you can keep up to date with us across all our social media channels. On Instagram and X and TikTok, you can find us at The Chris Mack Show. You can search for The Chris Macpherson Show on Facebook. You can also find us on YouTube, which is where most of our videos are popping up. You can keep up to date with those by subscribing and hitting the bell down below to make sure you get notifications. You can also find us on Spotify if you want an audio-only experience of The Chris Macpherson Show. Big thank you for tuning back in for the Black and White and Sport. No grey opinions here, and we look forward to bringing you across the sporting landscape again next week.